aside from that, when the music's playing, probably I'm the only one talking. If I do this, it's wrap it up because we do go to 2 commercials. All pretty simple things. I'm careful about how I talk about COVID. I won't say stop, I won't say that the election was stolen, though I think there's a lot of evidence, and with each day, more evidence that there was at least huge cheating. But I won't say that because I don't want to be kicked off YouTube. So I would say there was election issues.
I might not say a lot. I have to by all the Republicans, and I'll need to vote for me. I might not say I might not.
Yeah.
Because we're on it.
Yeah.
And I need everybody.
Yeah.
And I want to win. I can't do it.
Well, she'll be what, 91?
Does it matter?
If she's
was already filed.
I know she's already filed. I saw that the other day.
Yeah, I mean, we've already filed. I imagine she's going to say the right thing, hopefully in the right way. I want to win. I'll be moving right. I mean, once I get it.
Understand that game.
Well, that's what you have to do.
From a statewide perspective, yes.
From a statewide perspective, that's right.
If it wasn't statewide, it might be a little different.
Well, it might be different, yes.
Okay. Well, I think we're just about to be on. Yep. And good morning. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. Welcome. Remember, if you like what I'm doing, like and subscribe. We're on Spotify, YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook, as well as for my traditional listeners, welcome. And we are on Saturdays from 3 to 4. As I always do, I start with a few calendar issues or opportunities to get involved, because just sitting on your butt doesn't work anymore. Freedom and responsibility go hand in hand. And because of that, I think that it's important. You need to talk to your neighbors. Don't avoid those what they call third rail issues like politics and religion, because our country's changing. And if you believe in some traditional values, you need to defend them. So first opportunity to get involved. As you know, I'm involved with Constitutionalists for California. I'm in leadership. And the group is meeting in Kingsburg. We're having a dinner meeting at Deli Casa. So it's a little restaurant in Kingsburg tonight at 6:30. It's just an opportunity where there'll be less meeting and more opportunity to see what the people are like. Maybe it's your place, because you need to find your pack. You need to become involved. Thursday night, there is no Constitutionalists for California meeting in Clovis. We decided we were going to go watch Charlie Kirk at Cornerstone Church. I'm not sure if there are spaces still available, but Charlie Kirk is definitely a force with youth. I don't agree with him on everything, but I think that by and large, we are lucky that he is out there with Turning Point and mobilizing youth. So that's really an important thing. So I'm going to go and I'm going to support him. May 1st, this is my last event on the calendar at Hobbs Grove in Sanger. We're having a fundraiser for Rachel Hamm. She's running for Secretary of State. I really like and support Rachel Hamm, know her pretty well. And it's $99. There's a time to talk. So that starts at 4, dinner's at 5:30. You can either pay in person, but it'll need to either be cash or check. If you want to do credit, it is Rachel Hamm. That's Hamm with 2 M's, SOS, for Secretary of State.com/donate. Really like this candidate. Would be a good opportunity to go out and meet the Constitutionalists, because a bunch of us will be there. Hope you get involved. My guest today, she's jumping in on a pretty big position, and she's jumping in early because it's a huge position, and she's running against somebody that has been in, I think she's been in Senate longer than I've been alive. That's probably a slight exaggeration, but not by much.
Perhaps.
My guest is running against Feinstein, and her name is Denice Pandol. So welcome.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for having me on the show today. Appreciate it.
So why are you running?
Because my heart is broken over what's happened in California and the nation. And you've heard me speak before. You know, I'm deeply committed to our Judeo-Christian traditions in the United States. And as we see the rise of socialism and communism throughout our country, throughout California, and we see the socialist control on the state level. You know, Gavin Newsom and the Democrats in the state legislature, and again, I'm running against Dianne Feinstein. I'll be in the United States Senate when I'm elected, I hope and pray. But even on the state level, you know, we've got Democrats now pushing to have communists and socialists appointed by the governor and appointed by state legislatures. They're taking our state and our country in the wrong direction. Critical race theory is a part of that. And another tremendous part of that is, you know, the situation on water, and I hope you'll give me an opportunity to talk about the water crisis in our state and in the western region of the United States. It's deeply important. It's a national security issue, as is our fossil fuel energy.
So you're basically, this is a statewide office. It's not like there are two sections where you vote for Senate. You are running in the seat that will be up in 2024.
I will be on the people's ballot on March 5th for the primary. And statistically, it shows that Christians, a lot of them don't get out to vote. And as somebody that stands for our Judeo-Christian way of life, our principles, our values that are codified in the United States Constitution and in the Bill of Rights, we really need to see everybody turn out so that the Democrats can be defeated. And once I'm in the United States Senate, I can work on issues to help change this state for the better as well as the nation.
Okay. So why are you qualified for this position? What experience do you have that sets you up for this?
As an educator, I'm just deeply immersed in the issues. I know what needs to be done. I know what has to happen going forward. I'm a political science. Both my undergraduate and advanced degrees are in political science, international relations. I studied my specialty in graduate school was Middle Eastern affairs, but within the context of Middle Eastern issues, which are so fundamentally tied to so much of what's going on here in the United States today. And we can hopefully get into that a little bit later. It's important that our nation be safe. Let me just say, if I may, you know, talking about my qualifications, if I could just jump into for just a moment about things related to the fossil fuel. This state under Gavin Newsom's leadership and this country under Democrat leadership is now going to Iran, the world's largest sponsor of state terrorism, killing more Americans than Al-Qaeda. And if everyone can remember back to the late 1970s, Iran, which is being asked by our president and wants to export oil to California and to the United States as a whole, shut down that waterway. Look at a map, ladies and gentlemen. That waterway, the Strait of Hormuz, that runs between Oman and Iran, they shut it down. They weaponized oil. And when you think about it, and I hope all of you will take the time to say this to Democrats and independents, I'm going to need their vote. You need to tell the environmentalists that the dirtiest oil in the world comes from countries like Iran and Russia and Venezuela, countries other than the United States. The United States of America, ladies and gentlemen, has the cleanest oil in the world, the cleanest liquefied natural gas, the cleanest coal. Nuclear energy is the cheapest and the cleanest. We have, and this is really important, please make a note, We have the least greenhouse gas emissions in the world. We've got the cleanest air and the cleanest water. Why in the world would the United States of America and Gavin Newsom and California, why would the Democrats and environmentalists open up the United States and our state to import dirty oil and liquefied natural gas when we have all that we need right here in America? And by the way, to those Californians out there listening today, or on Saturday, excuse me, let's remind everybody that California used to export oil to all of our states 100 years ago. We could be doing that again today. Think about the jobs. Think about people getting out of their cars and off the street that would have a job again in the oil and gas industry.
Not just a job, a good paying job.
A good paying job. Let's talk about lithium and the supply chain problems that we've experienced under the Democrats. Think about China. Every time you pick up a product that has made in China, you should set it back down. Let me tell you a little story. We have in Southern California something called the Salton Sea, the Lithium Valley. You need, ladies and gentlemen, lithium ore to make our batteries.
A lot of it.
Yeah, you need
to make
a lot
a small
of it.
number of batteries.
But guess what? We've got all we need to provide all the batteries that the American people absolutely need to have in this country. We don't need to be importing Chinese batteries. Absolutely not. And think about this. It's worse. It's even more important to consider the human rights abuses. So big tech companies here in California have used mothers and their children in lithium mines, cobalt mines in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And I want you to think about this and pray for these mothers and their children. So we've got them going into these mines that is being pushed by high tech in California, and they're being maimed and killed. Every week, women and children are maimed and killed. Those children should be in school, getting an education, and the mothers should be there to take care of their families. But they're being killed in these mines, and it's really a human rights crisis. Why do we have these Americans, Democrats, people that are supposed to care about the lives of others, supporting this? Keeping people getting they talk about minimum wage increases. People, getting a few dollars a day, barely enough to feed their family, barely enough to feed themselves. And here in the United States of America, right here in California, mineral-rich California, we could be doing everything that this country needs. And I want the people of California to know that as their United States Senator, I will work very hard to end this practice and do the kind of manufacturing that needs to be done in the Salton Sea and the Lithium Valley in this state, not only so that people get back to work, but we can end the kinds of supply chain problems and importing products from a country like China that's involved in proxy wars against the United States and involved in proxy wars against our NATO allies and against Ukraine. Ukraine might not have been the least corrupt country in the world, but they were still a democracy. They still had elections. There's still a Jewish and Christian community that's vibrant and active in the country, and they're being slaughtered.
So you kind of touched on something that I thought was very important. When we outsource everything, and our Speaker of the House, Pelosi, recently said, hey, what's the problem with importing food? Well, food's even more critical than these batteries.
The last thing we need is food insecurity. And
right.
let me say to your audience, if I may, just jump in real quick. As your United States Senator, ladies and gentlemen, I will work very hard with Republicans and Democrats in the Senate and the House to pass legislation. Now, this is important. I don't know why it hasn't been done to date, But I will work hard to pass legislation to end the right and ability of countries like China and Russia, Islamic countries like Qatar. All three of those countries have initiated a tremendous propaganda campaign that promotes these radical climate change activists, propaganda that promotes communism and socialism in the United States. Countries that are buying up our farmland for what? For the water rights underground. Even Harvard University and liberal institutions are buying up our vineyards in California so that they can have the water rights. It's wrong, it's immoral, it's evil. Why are we giving away our water rights to countries like communist countries like China and Russia and Islamic countries that want to buy up land? And again, and it's not just, by the way, our farmland, it's not just our vineyards, but it's land next to our military bases. And, I'd like to challenge the people that are in the United States Senate and in the United States House. Let's get some legislation passed to make that unlawful. Let's protect California and the American homeland. Food insecurity is extremely important, and I don't know why there isn't more conversation about that. If you look at the historical record, and as a political science and a student of history, I minored in history. If you look at the history of the world, if you look at the history of communist and socialist movements, what's happened to those populations in those countries? Well, they've starved to death. They were allowed to starve to death.
That was one of their tools to break them.
To manipulate and control the population. And here we are. Here America sits with this tremendous history before us to look at and examine. And we're allowing it to be repeated in this country by Democrats that are perfectly supportive of having fewer children and selling land. And then think about this. Let's talk about water for just a moment. Do you mind?
No, I was going to transition there.
Thank you. I'd like to pivot to water myself.
It's top on my list.
Okay, great. I'm so glad. Water is also a national security issue. I not only want to pass legislation as your United States Senator to make the fossil fuel industry a national security issue so that it is protected, because you cannot have a winning, successful military if you don't have enough oil and gas to make that happen. And you cannot develop a manufacturing base in this country unless, of course, you can end importing everything that's manufactured from other countries around the world.
Well, and we have the resources to do it. We just don't do it.
And I will work to make, as President Trump did, by the way, bring manufacturing home. Bring it back home to California.
So how does
bring water? It back home.
So how does water connect to that?
Let's talk about water. So in looking at the water crisis and thinking about how these communist and socialist countries and Democrats want to make us insecure in terms of water resources, again, I think about population control. We've heard people like AOC talk about how we have to have fewer children or no children, and how the water needs to be turned off. I don't know how many of the voters know about it here in California, but former Governor Brown signed legislation passed by the Democrats that wants to take the water use of the people of California and make it only possible that they can use 55 gallons of water a day. Ladies and gentlemen, do you realize that you use over 200 gallons of water a day? And I'm not talking about what you're using to water your yards with and your flower gardens and your vegetable gardens. I'm talking about inside your home, flushing the toilet, running the washing machine, washing your dishes, drinking water, a water to cook with, a shower, a bath. 55 gallons of water a day might get you 4 flushes of the toilet and a couple glasses of water, and maybe once a week, maybe you could do a little bit of laundry. I mean, 55 gallons of water doesn't go very far, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
And this is legislation that was already passed by the Democrats. That's supposed to go into effect next year in 2023. And we need to understand that water running off into the ocean is wasteful. It's wrong. All that needs to happen at a minimum cost is to do things like, for example, build underground storage facilities. We call them aquifers. We ought to have aquifers up and down the state so that when it rains, there's plenty of water stored that can be used by our farmers. If you look at where money's invested in our state, 50% of the water in this state is used by radical environmentalists and to save some bait fish called smelt, right?
Well, it's a little worse than that. There are a couple cities that are on the Delta that have sewage problems, and they have to dilute that sewage, and they have political pull, and so that water gets flushed out through the Delta, so the Delta isn't poisoned by the sewage from those cities.
Okay.
So there's another problem with that.
Well, the Israelis,
they're claiming that it is about environmentalism, but it is also a dirty little secret.
okay. I want to talk about the Israelis for just a moment. I love Israel. I love the Jewish people, and
We're going to go ahead and take a break, and I'll let you come back to that.
Reclamation plans. Okay.
This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. Thank you for watching on social media. If you're there, like, subscribe. Today, I am joined by Denice Pandol.
Denice Gary Pandol.
Denice Gary Pandol.
Yes,
Sorry.
Sir. Yes, sir.
So we're going, when we come back, we're going to go into Israel. Can you connect Israel and water a little bit? Because they do some amazing things with water.
Yeah, so let's talk.
So let's go ahead.
Okay.
We're going to let it come back. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. Today I am joined by Denice Gary Pandol. She is running for the U.S. Senate against Dianne Feinstein. I think Diane's been there too long, folks. Way too long.
Well, let's just, if I may, let's just mention that she's been sitting on the Senate subcommittee for water and power. Hello, Diane.
And never done a thing.
You've been sitting on the Senate subcommittee and on the Senate committee for energy and natural resources. But what have you done for the ranchers and farmers here in the state of California and in the western region of the United States? You know, I talk to ranchers and they're slaughtering their animals.
Right,
because they haven't had enough water. Farmers haven't been able to grow the crops that we need, and yet California helps feed the nation and the world. This is a tremendous crisis, and we have to fix the water issue. And as I said before the break, aquifers are extremely important. But if you do your research on water, one of the things that impressed me when I was in Israel and here in California that needs to happen is Israel's reclamation plans. Israel is, Israel like California doesn't get a lot of rainfall, and through their reclamation plans, which are extremely effective, they've been able to provide all of the clean water resources for their agricultural needs and their ranching needs in the state of Israel. Look at the fact that California's entire state borders the Pacific Ocean. Israel has set up some desalination plants there that have done a tremendous job in terms of saving fish eggs. You know, we want to always say that the technology now is there, thanks to the Israelis, to safeguard the fish and provide what's necessary in desalination plants, as well as provide clean drinking water. And of course, there are dams and reservoirs. I just want to say that what I want to do as your United States Senator is get legislation passed whereby a piece of the general fund is going each and every year to water infrastructure. And again, those aquifers can be built at a minimum cost. When I look at Carlsbad, ladies and gentlemen, look at the desalination plant that the people of Carlsbad, California built. It received an award as literally the world's largest desal plant, as well as the greatest and the very best. And thanks to Israeli high tech and sophistication, we can replicate that in some other areas. And that provides the entire people of Carlsbad, California, all of their water needs.
So I have a question
Yes.
about desal, because one
Okay.
of its Achilles heel is that it's fairly power expensive. It's intensive power.
But it's already getting better. The research.
So how do we power it so that it is not cost prohibitive? I think I know the answer, and I'm hoping I know where you're going.
Well, let's hear what you have to say.
My understanding is that small-scale nuclear is the way to go, much like the model used in Sweden and France.
Okay.
For, they figured out ways to deal with the rods so there's not the recycling issue.
Okay.
And they're powering, a community of 50,000 people, 100,000 people.
You
could use that for desal quite successfully.
Yes, you can. And it can be used for 100,000 people. I want to say something about Los Angeles because, too, getting back to desalination plants and underground aquifers. So I was talking to an audience down there, and they don't even realize that when the Los Angeles River fills up after rain,
it flushes right out. Yeah.
Flushes right out into the ocean. And I don't know if our audience realizes that after it rains and we enter the spring season, that there's enough water there in the Los Angeles River to take care of the entire population of Los Angeles. I was talking at the GOP convention over the weekend, working the convention very hard, and I was talking to some people from Northern California. They're upset over tunnels being built that would pull water from Northern California to Kern County in the Central Valley. We don't need tunnels, and we don't need to upset the people of Northern California. They can have their own desal plant, and I believe through public-private partnerships as well, we can make desalination and reclamation plants happen. I want to talk to your audience real quick about fog capture. The Israelis have developed systems where literally they pull moisture out of the air, especially on foggy days. And as I've been talking to people, audiences about this up and down the state since last year, I met a former veteran, United States Army veteran, who is also running for Congress up north. And he said that he did the research after listening to me speak, and he put up his own atmospheric or water moisture fog capture facility on his own property, and he's now having enough water for him and his family and all the needs that he has on his own personal and private property. The Israelis have found a way to do this cost effectively to take care of, again, farms and ranches, all of their agricultural needs. That's an important development that's happened in Israel. I'd like to see people do that here in the state of California. It's incredibly important.
Absolutely incredibly important. I'm going to go ahead and pivot, though.
Okay.
We
Lots
have
to talk about.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
This is nowhere near enough time.
Right.
Our southern border, and we're about the only country in the world that just doesn't seem to, at least one party doesn't believe we even need borders, and every other country in the world, including if you were trying to sneak into Mexico.
If you want to get arrested, try to sneak into Mexico.
Right.
Yeah. Get arrested and probably tortured or chained up, and
At
God
least,
only knows.
At least incarcerated.
Yeah,
You would be in real trouble as opposed to,
Oh, yes. Right.
We've decided that we don't even need to do anything but check them in so that we can put them on a bus, give them a hotel stay, give them some money, and bus them to wherever they want.
Get them on welfare and have them vote for a Democrat.
Yeah.
Right.
So what do we do about the southern border?
What other nation states do about their borders? They protect their borders. And I appreciate President Trump's work on the border issue. You know, we were finally getting the border secure. And as your state senator, ladies and gentlemen, I will work to secure it again. I thought it was fascinating, and it didn't get a lot of play when President Trump was in office. But President Trump's wall not only would have had, you know, electronic equipment to surveil what was going on, in addition to the wall itself, but the wall was going to go underground. And, you know, raise your hand if you heard about that. You know, the tunnels that have been built by Islamic countries like Iran, and along with the cooperation and support of Islamic countries and terrorist groups, the tunnels that are underground from Mexico into California and into other states in the United States, for example, Arizona, New Mexico. It's important to understand that President Trump's wall also went underground to prevent these criminal gangs from coming into the United States of America and destroying our way of life. And when you think about the fentanyl supply chain into this country,
Right through that southern
right
border.
through that southern border, when you think about ISIS that beheaded children for their Christian faith.
So that is the key point. It's not just ISIS. It's everybody's coming across that southern border with almost no checks because they're stopping the border patrol from doing their job.
What happened to people looking at again, let's go back in history. You know, the Statue of Liberty, our ports of entry into the United States once upon a time. You know, we had doctors there at ports of entry and nurses. We had law enforcement there. They protected the people of this country. And, you know, ladies and gentlemen, you know, the president's responsibility, his chief responsibility is to protect the people of this country. How do you protect the people of this country if you have no idea who is coming into your country? We don't allow people, just anybody, to walk into our homes. We don't allow just anybody to walk into our schools or walk into an airplane or on a train or anywhere else. We have to have identification. We have to know who these people are.
ID?
Oh, yes.
In this country, we don't have to even have ID to vote in a whole lot of the states.
And as your U.S. Senator, voter integrity is extremely, you can imagine as a candidate, extremely important to me. And I absolutely believe we need to get back to the days in which everyone voted and we counted those ballots. And, oh, by the way, at the end of the day or the next day, we knew who won. And
instead of mail-in, which they play all kinds of games with.
They play it out for weeks and weeks and weeks at a time.
Well,
months.
But they called the Trump-Biden election within 20 minutes here in California.
Yes, they did.
But a lot of those ballots weren't in for 2 weeks.
And you know, the military generally votes more conservatively. They generally vote for Republican candidates. And how in the world did they get the entire vote counted by the United States military overseas? We have our professional military operating in over 70 countries against Islamic terrorism and other terrorists and other groups that are involved in criminal networks around the globe. How do we get all of their votes in all 70 foreign countries that quickly?
I think that the southern border is a bigger issue than when Trump ran the first time.
It is.
It is because it has become an absolute nightmare.
Right, absolutely. And, you know, when you think about, again, the criminal gangs, Islamic terrorists coming into this country, mafia groups, whether they be from Russia, China, or Mexico. I want to, again, go back to Iran. You know, I don't know how many people realize, but Iran's been growing its footprint in South America, in Central America. And
did not know that one.
You did not.
I did know Mexico. I did not know the others.
Absolutely. South America and Central America, the footprint has been growing.
And that's a dictatorship, folks. An evil dictatorship.
Yes. They've been involved. Well, the new, quote-unquote, elected leader of Iran is referred to as a butcher. He is really a savage individual against the Iranian people. not just against Christians and Jews and other religious minority groups that are living in South America and around the globe. And I'd like you to consider those attacks that just occurred against U.S. forces in Iraq and in Syria. I mean, we still have Iranian militias and other militia groups that are targeting Americans overseas, and yet we've got Democrats that are perfectly content to have Russia negotiate with Iran on an issue as important as nuclear weapons and ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles, which are weapons of mass destruction, and the United States isn't even in the room.
Well,
we've got
believe
Russia negotiating for us at the table with Iran, and we're not even sitting at the table, and yet, let's talk about Iran. Can we pivot to Ukraine for just a moment?
Good, because as important as Iran is, Ukraine's number one in the news.
Yeah,
Russia dynamic is number one in the news.
Let's talk about it. So, as a political scientist, one of the things that used to be of concern to more traditional political scientists taught in the field is the idea of the domino effect. We wanted to prevent the spread of communism. When I was in Romania,
we used to. Now half the country does, and I don't know about the other half.
They support the ideology. Democrats support the ideology. Just to give people a personal story about when I was in Romania after Nicolae Ceausescu, the dictator of that country. The Russian mafia was so dangerous, so concerning to the Romanian people, everybody. I was asked not even to speak English when I was in a taxi anywhere out and about with Romanian people for fear of the Russian mafia and those individuals being targeted or possibly held for ransom, thinking that they would get money from an American. And, the policy under a communist or socialist country, like, for example, in Romania, was the policy that forced women to have 5 children. And if they didn't have 5 children, if I could expound on that for just a moment, if a woman was unable, and not every woman is even able to have children, but if a woman was unable to have 5 children, she could begin experiencing persecution from the state. She could lose her job. She could be unemployable. She would be discriminated against her community.
So, but that is a theme of communist all around.
Yes, exactly. And so, I think it's important. No water, okay. Well, forgive me if I cough. When I was in Romania, I wanted to help. It was Christmas break, and it was the dead of winter. I heard about children that had been abandoned in that country by their families because they just couldn't care for them, and they were in these awful, awful institutions where they weren't cared for, and they were malnourished in these institutions. They were out any proper care. And
is this early 90s?
This was 90s. This was late 90s.
Late 90s. Okay, because I remember first hearing about it in the early 90s.
Well, I went in the late 90s, just before 9/11, and I visited a particularly horrific institution in Denice.
So how does this connect to Ukraine? Because I get we're right in that region.
Okay, so the Ukrainian people have long wanted to be separated from Russia because they know the brutality of Russian rule. They want to have freedom of religion. They want to have freedom of speech. They want to have freedom of the press. And they had that. And like Romania, like where my people are from, Estonia and Latvia, they worked so hard to separate themselves from communism, from being part of the Soviet Socialist Republic.
So there's an important point that goes with this. So I'll let you finish.
Okay, thank you. So Democrat presidents and leaders, they first, under William Jefferson Clinton, signed the Budapest Memorandum. Under Obama Biden, they signed the Minsk agreement, several agreements there, and then last year in November 2021, Biden as president signed a strategic partnership with Ukraine that said, we will secure your country because you gave up all your nuclear weapons, all of your heavy weaponry, all of your missiles and rockets, and Ukraine, under the agreements the United States orchestrated, as well as the UK, United Kingdom, they orchestrated those agreements, and Ukraine gave everything back to Russia. And if this president, if the Democrats had just gotten to the leadership in Ukraine, those weapons that we had available to the people of Ukraine, to the leadership of Ukraine last year in November, again, President Biden, November of last year, 2021, signed a new strategic partnership securing Ukraine, but we didn't do it. Yeah. So think about the message that sends to our enemies and to our allies. The United States cannot be trusted. How is the United States going to remain number one in the world? And we need to, because there's lots of enemies out there.
Oh.
So we need to remain.
Russia, I don't even see as the biggest one.
No, China is. We need to remain number one. But when countries and nations feel like we can't be trusted, how do we do that? Because we don't have the influence to get foreign policy measures secured that would be in the best interests of our country when they don't trust us. And Ukraine certainly couldn't trust us going forward.
Right.
Because we should have had everything that Ukraine needed to deter Russia last year.
I think one of the key points in that story is that people that have lived under tyranny,
right,
in this case communism, well, how come they're anti-communist if communism is so great? I want to say that to all my friends on the left. I know people that came from Venezuela.
Yes,
they're about as anti-communist, pro-freedom as you
yes.
get. You can say the same thing about people from the Eastern Bloc. All those
Why do people come up from Mexico? It's so corrupt.
Right.
And
we're the beacon for the world, and
right.
Now we've got one party that wants to turn us towards a failed system.
Yes.
How come the people are not rushing to those places in the world where it's authoritarian? They don't. They come here for freedom.
You know, I want.
So we're going to take our last break. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. When we come back,
freedom of speech. Can we talk about that?
I would love to talk about freedom of speech, and let's tie the First Amendment in if we can, because
yes, absolutely.
Those 5 aspects of the First Amendment are integral to the amazing freedom we have.
Right.
We're going to go ahead and come back. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. I am joined by Denice Pandol. She is running against the evil Dianne Feinstein. I use the word evil. Maybe just doddering and incompetent would be fairer.
Incompetent and ineffective. She hasn't done what California needs for water, for fossil fuel energy, for certainly the security of this country and this state.
Yeah, agreed. So you want to talk about freedom of speech?
I would like to for just a moment.
I always love to talk about freedom of speech.
So we've seen the leftists, the Democrats, work very hard to shut down freedom of speech. I used to teach at the college and university level. Whether it was Islamic groups or socialists on campus, Democrats, they always try to shut down anybody that wants to provide both sides of an issue.
Well, they call it hate speech, and that is one of the ways they control us.
But it's so important to understand that, you know, if you're working at a university or a community college, you need to give both sides of an issue. But you can't really do that anymore and be successful, because the left will protest and try to get you unemployed. And that's happened to so many educators.
Particularly on college campuses.
Particularly on college and university campuses. That's right. But it's also happened at the high school level, and it's happening on grades K through well, all the way from K through 12. It's extremely important, I think, that as your United States Senator, I work hard to make sure there are safeguards in place to protect the First Amendment rights, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, the right to peacefully assemble, and that means if there's a protest at a Planned Parenthood facility, people have a right to have a peaceful protest. It says that in our Constitution, in the first Bill of Rights.
It even says the word peaceful.
Peaceful protest. The right to petition the government for a redress of grievances. And of course, we also saw under COVID the churches that were forcefully shut down. There's freedom of religion. If people want to gather together and worship God, they should be able to do that.
Wait, isn't COVID the higher power and government the higher power?
It's not man, certainly.
Right.
And there's a higher power, and we're all going to be held accountable.
Well, and we were granted inalienable rights, meaning
Right.
God-given rights.
Declaration of Independence says that we the people, right? We're all created equal under God. And you know, that triggers a little bit of history. You know, when you think about the Declaration of Independence being written at the time after we entered into our war for independence against a king, against tyranny that didn't allow for freedom of speech, that didn't allow for freedom of the press, for freedom of religion. When you think about that Declaration of Independence, you know, Thomas Jefferson really didn't like slavery. People say, well, he had slaves. He may have had slaves, but people need to understand that there was a tremendous debate at work in this country. In fact, our own party, the Republican Party, was formed in 1854. They were formed because people were triggered. People were angry. The American people, 10,000 Americans, got together in Jackson, Michigan, at a time where there wasn't television or radio or social media.
Or even very good transportation.
Exactly.
It was real work to gather 10,000 people.
Right, but think about that, ladies and gentlemen. 10,000 people got together in Jackson, Michigan, because of the Kansas-Nebraska, which was going to allow slavery to happen. Every time a non-slave state was created and admitted to the Union, it was going to allow a slave state to be admitted to the Union. And people, 10,000 Americans, managed to come together and say, we need a new party in the United States. We're going to call it the Republican Party. And we're going to provide a Republican Party platform that our first president, Abraham Lincoln, ran on, the Republican Party platform. And I don't care what you hear from the left in America, but he ran on that platform, and it was an anti-slavery platform because our party was a new party. It was formed as a result of a fight in this country against racism and discrimination. And ladies and gentlemen, you Republicans out there, when you're talking to your friends that are liberals, that are leftists, you need to tell them we were the people. We were the people that stood against racism. We were not the party of the KKK. We were not the party that burned crosses and drove out good people from the South that could have been instrumental and important in terms of contributing to that society. People that we brought over from slave ships, that rather than letting them get an education and flourish as they did in the North, they were persecuted and killed in the South. You know, we need to remind the American people who we are as a party and really what we stand for historically.
We're down to about 3 minutes. So, can you give us contact information? I want to get that in. Why are you hopeful?
I'm hopeful because
we need both of those.
I'm hopeful because I believe that other people's heart is breaking for this, that really love California and love America, and they want to see people like me get into office to fight the corruption, to fight the abuse of power, to make sure that we're not that there isn't food insecurity, there isn't water insecurity, that we have a country that can stand independently and have a manufacturing base that provides everything America needs and our allies need. Because there will be wars going forward as we see China build that Road and Belt Initiative all across Asia and the Middle East and into Europe.
Oh, yeah.
The Belt and Road Initiative, excuse me. And that's important. And Russia's joining forces. They've signed that treaty of limitless freedom. And I'm going to be speaking tonight, and I believe you mentioned it. I'm going to be speaking tonight at for the Republican Women Federated at 1015 North 10th Avenue in Hanford, I believe. It's Hanford, California. I'll be speaking there tonight. The meeting starts, I believe, at 5:30, 6 o'clock. People can go and hear me there tonight. And then next Tuesday, on May 3rd, I'll be speaking in Clovis at the California Republican Assembly, and they can call Molly and now yet 559-281-2966. They meet at 1123 Railroad Avenue in Clovis. I'll be speaking there at 6 p.m. If you like to go and ask me questions, maybe hear additional things I'd like to be talking about tonight and next week, I hope that you will attend. Please go to DeniceGaryPandol.com, my website. It's just come online. Again, my name is spelled Denice. It's Denice with a C. Gary, Gary, Pandol, P as in Papa, Andol. Denice Gary Pandol. I only have my water position paper up at this point. Forgive me. I've been so busy traveling up and down the state. I just came from a convention, so check it out. Please make a contribution. I need a lot of resources to win against Dianne Feinstein.
No doubt. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. Well, Denice, it was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you
I think that, folks, you should consider Denice. I think she's a real American, and I think that her positions on most issues are there. Please give her serious consideration. If you liked what happened today, subscribe. If you like Denice, go to her website, check her out.